Whenever you start a new MyGM save in WWE 2K22, perhaps the biggest early game decision, or decisions should I say, is the draft. You're given $2.75 million to draft as many superstars as you wish, with the choices being made here significantly impacting your run. So when we received this comment from George Baker asking us to autofill our draft, we were naturally intrigued. You see, when you're choosing who to sign at the start of a run, there's an option in the bottom left hand corner that will auto-select a suggested superstar, which is how we're going to be deciding our entire draft. Now this is clearly already a challenge in itself, as we don't have a say over who we sign, but George also asked us to autofill every single pay-per-view. Now this might be a step too far, as I've tried autofilling shows and trust me, it goes down worse than ECW after WWE went PG. So instead, we've decided to add our own different challenge, being that we can't sign any free agents after the draft is done, meaning that we only have the auto-drafted superstars and any jobbers that we need to bring in. So after all of that, the question is, can I beat MyGM by auto-filling the draft? Let's find out. Okay, so let's load into MyGM and auto-fill the draft. So seeing as in the draft I'm going to be basically allowing the computer to choose as many wrestlers as physically possible, I'm inevitably going to be using pretty much my entire budget, so I'm going to go with Stephanie as I think I'm going to need some more money later down the line. And if any of you predicted that I'd go for any other brand than NXT, then you've clearly not been watching our videos for very long, but yeah, NXT is the obvious choice and will always be. Then as per usual for the session settings, we've got Shane McMahon, NXT UK and Hard, and obviously 15 weeks for the duration. Right, so the draft, obviously down in the bottom left hand corner is the recommendations, and that's exactly what I'm going to be using to build this entire thing. So by clicking in the R stick, it will take me down to who it recommends me to sign, and I'm basically just going to sign the first person on this list for every single round of the draft. So I will let you know who I'm signing at what stage, but obviously there's not much more to say other than I'm just choosing whoever they tell me to. So clearly the first pick is going to be Roman Reigns. Okay, second pick we've got R-Truth, so at least that links up with the heel-face dynamic and the class type dynamic. Not the best stamina, but obviously as it's the computer doing this, I don't think they take anything like that into account, so we've got to just deal with it. Right, so it's actually going straight for a female champion as well, which is kind of nice, because I didn't know how it was going to organise that. But they've actually given me Becky Lynch, which is pretty nice, and as you can see in the bottom left, they've given me Charlotte Flair, so I think that's going to be my next pick as well. Which, to be honest, is a pretty good matchup for the female title. And yep, as predicted, they've given me Charlotte Flair, so that should actually be a really nice rivalry. Right, so the first member of our male tag team is actually going to be Kevin Owens, which is a pretty expensive pick, but again, we just have to go with it. Then fighting against him, we've got Roderick Strong, so I don't know whether they're going to do 2 heel fighters versus 2 face bruisers, or whether they're going to do one of each on each side, but this is a pretty decent start to our draft. I don't actually have many complaints so far, bar possibly the stamina. So the next pick is actually Io Shirai, which is a pretty good one for the female tag titles, as obviously the Cruiser Giant dynamic is brilliant. And then they've gone ahead and given us Tamina as well, which is actually a pretty good start for the female tag titles. Now they've selected Ricochet for us, so I don't think they are thinking in terms of tag teams. I believe they're probably just picking a bunch of singles matches, and then it's our job to mix and match them into a bunch of different rivalries. Now, that's not ideal, but it's certainly not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So Ricochet joins the roster, and I'm kind of excited to see who he's going to be fighting. Okay, so they've given him T-Bar to fight, which is actually a pretty decent pick, as the Cruiser Giant dynamic, as we've just mentioned, is very good. And T-Bar's always a pretty reliable guy for me whenever I play this game mode, but what I am worried about is the budget in the top right-hand corner, as that's pretty low already. We still have T-Bar and then 2 more female superstars to draft, and I don't think the budget's going to cover an extra rivalry. And as you'll all know, since there's been 4 matches in the weekly shows and 5 in the pay-per-views, it's been absolutely vital to get a lot of superstars on the roster. So I think possibly this could be the biggest challenge, is having a pretty limited roster due to the overspending in the draft. Right, so this is not great. We've only got 4 female superstars and they're advising us to sign another male one. So it's given us Bartel as the opponent to Timothy Thatcher, and that's actually alright, as we can mix and match the tag teams using them as their specialists so that you can just put them in whatever rivalries. But we're in serious need of another female tag team. Alright, so all hope might not be lost, as we've actually been given Candice LeRae in the next pick. I'll be interested to see who she gets put up against, but I can't imagine it's going to be anyone great. So actually, Dana Brooke is the last pick we're going to have, and she matches up well with Candice LeRae, and that means that I can put the tag team on, as I have 2 heel, 2 face. But again, she's only got 52 stamina, and I think that most people that I've actually drafted so far only have 60s, maybe 70s tops. So if it's not the budget that's going to cause us a bunch of issues, it's definitely the stamina. So anyway, that's the draft in completion, and I'm actually quite happy with it. It's gone a lot better than I thought it would, and we've got some good matchups for the titles, and hopefully it's enough to carry us through the first 5 weeks, and then we can try and make some signings after that. And of course, as always, we're going to give the 2 most popular superstars we have the male and female championship. So the first show kind of picks itself, as we're going to need to crown some tag titles champions, so we've got the 2 mid-cards being those, and then we've got the male and the female title on the line in the opener and the main event. So obviously this show actually seems pretty good, with all of the face-heel dynamics and all of the class types matching up, but the problem is that the stamina is really bad, and actually some of the star power on these superstars is quite low. So whether it goes down well or not, I'm not too sure, but hopefully it kicks us off with a good start. So no surprises, as in the opener, the head of the table, the big dog, the big dog's yard, the big head of the big table, the big dog of the big head of the big table of the big dog's yard, wins the title in a 3.5 star great match. The first mid-card goes down pretty badly, but Owens and Ricochet are crowned the first ever NXT Tag Team Champions on this run. In complete contrast to that, we actually have a 3-star match between Tamina, LeRae, Shirai, and Brooke, which results in LeRae and Tamina winning the titles. That's actually a really good start. And also, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've managed to start a rivalry in every single match so far. And of course I've spoken too soon, as Becky doesn't start a rivalry with Charlotte, but she does retain her title, and it's only a 2.5 star match, so pretty poor ending to the show. After week 1 with 3,000 fans down, so not the end of the world, and certainly not too many fans that we can't come back, but being down after week 1 is never great. So moving on into week 2, we have the male tag team titles as the opener, and then the main event is Charlotte's rematch that she requested against Becky for the women's championship. I put that one in a tables match just to try and make it a little bit more interesting, as I'm a bit worried that rivalry might not progress again. But anyway, the mid-card matches are Timothy Thatcher versus Bartel, and then the women's tag matches, but I'm not going to put the title on the line in that one. So let's advance and hope that this show does okay. So it opens up pretty well with Ricochet and Owens retaining their titles in a 3-star match. That rivalry is also level 2, so big things to come from these 4. Bartel wins in the first mid-card match, and no rivalry started, which is not good, and only 1.5 star rating. Terrible. Then the second mid-card match is actually pretty disappointing as well, as now we don't have the title on the line, it's only getting a 2-star rating. The rivalry has increased though, so I can't really complain too much. Okay, in stark contrast to the first show, Charlotte wins the title off of Becky, and it's rated 4-star. And to round it all up as well, the rivalry has actually started, so that's a much better turnout than last week. So as you can see, heading into week 3, we've actually lost another 3,000 fans on Shane, so again, not ideal, but to be honest, as long as we're not losing a ton of fans each week, we should be able to claw it back. Week 3's rolled around, and we've got the women's tag titles on the line in the opener, so hopefully that gives it a better rating than last week, and then the male title on the line in the main event in another tables match. Bartel and Timothy Thatcher are the first mid-card again because I need to rest some people, and then the male tag team match is the second mid-card fight, but no title on the line, much like last week. So let's hope that this show gains us a few more fans on Shane. I'm not expecting to overtake him, but just to get a few more back would be nice. So it seems like putting the title on the line is exactly what this tag team match needs, as it gets a 3.5 star this week. And for the first time in the run, Shirai and Brooke win the title, so that's a pretty good start for the show. Timothy Thatcher wins in the opening mid-card fight. It's another 1.5 star match, but at least it starts a rivalry this time. The second mid-card match gets a 2.5 star, which is pretty disappointing, but at least it's not 2 star, and the rivalry doesn't actually increase. So not exactly ideal, but at least it's matching the drama curve. And unbelievably, the big dog has been felled, as R-Truth wins the title in the main event in a 4-star match. The rivalry doesn't actually increase, but to be honest, that's good enough for me. And remarkably as well, we actually gained 12,000 fans on Shane that week, which puts us fairly comfortably ahead of him. So heading into week 4, we're actually 7,000 fans up with R-Truth as our champion, so this run's going quite well. So as you can see for week 4, we've spread our budget extremely thin, as we've had to upgrade our logistics just to try and get as many fans as possible. Now usually I'd use a couple of charity promos to do this, but I think seeing as I can upgrade logistics in this run, I'm going to try and keep on top of it as much as possible. But anyway, in terms of the show, we've got R-Truth versus Roman Reigns in the opener, as inevitably Roman came into the DMs after the fight and said that he wanted a rematch. And then for the main event, we've got T-Bar and Strong versus Owens and Ricochet, as once again, T-Bar came into my DMs and said he was ready to run a main event match. So if that gets anything less than 5 stars, he's being released. Then of course the same old boring fight in the first midcard match as Thatcher fights Bartel, and then the women's tag match is the second midcard fight. Anyway, let's advance and see how it all goes. So the big head of the big yard of the table of the head of the big dog wins his title back in a 3.5 star match. That rivalry is only level 2 though, so not exactly ideal going into WrestleMania Backlash, but they've put on some amazing matches so far, so I cannot complain. Bartel wins in the first midcard fight, and it actually gets a 2-star rating this time, which is unbelievable. And the second midcard fight has the women's tag match go to a level 4 rivalry and get a 3-star rating as well, so very good all round. So unfortunately T-Bar, as I said before the show, you would be released if you didn't get a 5-star match, so that is the last match you'll ever fight for NXT. No, of course I'm kidding, he actually gets a 4-star rated match and wins the titles off of Owens and Ricochet. So the decision to give him the main event match that he asked for has actually paid off. Not a bad show by any means, let's see if we're still ahead of Shane. And we are, but I think we're only ahead by another 1,000 more fans or so I think in the next show I'm going to put on some charity promos to try and reap in some more fans. But for now it's actually going pretty well, so long may it continue. Now I know it's early to use this power card, but I really do need the money, as you can see in the top right. So for week 5 of WrestleMania Backlash, I'm actually going to use the McMahon Presence power card. Hopefully this doesn't come back to bite me, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And in terms of the show, we don't actually have any promos that we can physically put on because every single superstar is in action. And of course, as you'd expect, all of the titles are on the line, with the female singles championship in the opener and then the male singles championship in the main event, with the midcard being made up of Bartel versus Thatcher and then the 2 tag rivalries. There's not much else to tell you about this show, so let's advance and hopefully drive an even bigger gap between us and Shane. So the opening match gets a 4.5 star rating, with the rivalry fully completed and Charlotte coming out on top as the women's champion. Bartel and Thatcher do what they do best and stink the house out with another 2-star rated match. The second midcard more than makes up for it though, with a 3.5 star match between T-Bar and Strong and Owens and Ricochet. That rivalry is complete with T-Bar and Strong coming out on top as the champions. And rather amazingly, the third and final midcard match actually gets a 4.5 star rating too. Tamina and LeRae come out on top, and it's a pretty good show so far, so hopefully the main event between Roman and R-Truth can deliver the goods. And as has come to be expected over the last few weeks, Roman and R-Truth come up big with a 4.5 star classic. Their rivalry is actually not over yet, and they've been putting on great matches every single week, so I think I'm just going to keep that one going. So after WrestleMania Backlash, we actually gained another 8,000 fans on Shane. So it's not exactly as many as I'd hoped it to be, but as you can see by the amount of money I have compared to him, the McMahon presence really made a difference. So week 6 is actually looking really poor, as we have a lot of stamina issues and a lot of rivalries that need to be reshuffled. We've had to go ahead and sign 4 new superstars from the jobbers section and put on a show which only has 1 title on the line. Genuinely, I can't see any of the singles matches on this card getting over a 2-star rating either. So I think this one's going to be brutal, but we're just going to have to advance and hope it doesn't damage us too much. So rather amazingly, T-Bar and Ricochet actually get a 3.5 star match in the opening fight. So if you ever find yourself doubting the Cruiser Giant dynamic, then just catch yourself and remember that it is definitely the best. The first midcard fight is Orikawa versus Magurda, and Orikawa actually comes out on top in a 1-star fight. It's going to be pretty hard to get some decent ratings on these terrible matches, but we seriously need them for filler. And as we predicted before we started, the second midcard fight between Bartel and Kevin Owens actually ends as a 2-star match. So a pretty poor show so far, but let's see if the main event can make up for it. I'll definitely take that, as Becky Lynch and Io Shirai win the titles in a 3-star main event match. The show is pretty bad of course, but I think it could have been worse based off what we saw on paper. So we actually managed to gain another 5,000 fans on Shane. I don't know what he's doing over there in NXT UK, but whatever it is, please do keep it up, as we need to keep this lead going into week 10. So week 7's certainly looking a little bit better, with Charlotte versus Dana in the opener for the title, and then Roman versus R-Truth in the main event for the men's title. The midcard sees the classic boring match of Bartel versus Thatcher go ahead again, and the women's tag team title actually on the line, with a new tag team made up of the jobber Jody Garcia and Tamina. As you can see on the right, we've padded all the promos out as charity promos, and we're just going to have to hope that this show gains us a few fans. The opening fight sees Charlotte retain her title in a 3-star match against Dana Brooke, which is actually pretty good, but no rivalry started, so it's not really ideal. Out of absolutely nowhere, the masters of mediocrity Marcel Bartel and Timothy Thatcher put on a 3-star match. Then it just keeps getting better as the second mid-card match actually picks up a 3.5 star rating. A new rivalry started and Becky Lynch and Io Shirai do retain their titles, so all round a great match. Then finally in the main event, R-Truth actually wins back the title in a 4.5 star classic. So some crazy match ratings all round, but unfortunately now our male champion is injured, so we're gonna have to try and figure that one out. And that show was actually huge for our fan count, as I think we gained around 22,000 fans on Shane, so that's looking really good. Week 8 has the opening match as the male tag team titles and then the main event as the women's title. Triple H actually gave me a To The Moon power card to use on Jody Garcia, but I've gone ahead and used it on Dana Brooke instead. As at the minute her popularity is only down at 59, so that extra 15 would be amazing for the women's title match. Then the mid-card matches are looking suitably terrible as Kevin Owens goes up against Rich Arakawa, RIP Rich. Then the second mid-card match is the bona fide classic, Timothy Thatcher versus Marcel Bartel, and hopefully they can build on their 3-star match last week and maybe get a 3.5 star? Let's advance and see how this one goes. T-Bar and Strong retain their titles in the opening match and it actually gets a 3.5 star rating. So Magurda and Ricochet could be a decent matchup for them in terms of a tag team, and this could be a pretty good rivalry. As expected, Owens beats Arakawa and it's a 2-star rated match, which is not too bad whatsoever, and a rivalry actually does form as well. Unfortunately, in the second mid-card match, Bartel and Thatcher do take a tiny step back and get a 2.5 star rating, but their rivalry is actually not progressing at all. Which in a very weird way is quite good, as we can keep putting on these pretty mediocre matches and save stamina on some of the bigger stars. Then to round things off in the main event, we have a 3.5 star match between Charlotte Flair and Dana Brooke, with Charlotte coming out with the title. That's also started a rivalry, so a decent show all round. Let's see how we did in terms of fans gained. So this week we actually ended up losing about 2,000 fans on Shane, but to be honest, we're still about 41,000 up, so it's not looking too bad at all. So heading into week 9, we have 2 championships on the line, with the male tag titles in the main event and the female tag titles in the opener. Then the mid-card matches, we have Kevin Owens versus Rich Arakawa again, and Timothy Thatcher versus Bartel, of course. To try and boost the rating on both of those, I've put them as tables matches, so let's see how well they'll do. The opening match has Becky and Io retain their titles once again in a 3-star match. It doesn't progress the rivalry, but at least it's giving us some decent match ratings. The first mid-card fight actually gets a 3-star rating, which is very good, as Kevin Owens once again takes out Arakawa in a tables match. Finally, in the second mid-card fight, this rivalry goes to a level 4 and it actually gets a 3.5 star rating as well. So all round, this show has been really good so far. Then in the final match, we've got a 3-star rating between T-Bar and Strong and Ricochet and Magurda. That rivalry's level 2 and T-Bar and Strong retain again. I wouldn't say it was an outstanding show, but certainly a very consistent one, and that's exactly what we need at this stage of a run. So heading into TLC, we've actually gained another 4,000 fans on Shane, meaning we're about 45,000 fans ahead. So of course, at this stage, I'm going to use my Fighting Champion power card and hopefully blow Shane out of the water in this pay-per-view. Unfortunately, going into the TLC pay-per-view, Shane has actually vetoed Roman Reigns, which makes this show a lot worse, but we're just going to have to deal with it. On top of that, he's also used a double cost power card, so he spent a ridiculous amount of money on each of the stipulations in this show. So anyway, that's the card going into the show. Let's just hope that we don't lose fans on Shane. That's kind of all I'm asking for from this pay-per-view. So amazingly, Ricochet and Magurda are the new tag team champions in a 5-star legendary rated match. Once again, the Fighting Champion power card is proving how overpowered it is. Owens vs Arakawa actually gets a 3-star match, and considering I probably wasn't going to have this on the card, that's certainly not too bad. Amazingly as well, to complete their rivalry, Bartel and Thatcher get a 4.5 star classic. Of course, that's got no title on the line either, that's just a straight up tables match, so what a performance from those two. The final mid-card fight unfortunately sees Becky Lynch get injured, but they retain their titles in another 4.5 star classic. So actually overall, the ratings have been really good on the matches, so hopefully we don't lose too many fans on Shane. Then to round off the show, it's a little bit disappointing as we only get a 4.5 star match in Flair vs Brooke, but that's still a pretty decent end. So let's advance and see if we actually manage to gain fans on Shane. I don't think we will have, but let's just hope and pray. Okay, so I must have really miscalculated, as not only did we gain fans on Shane, we gained around 70,000. So currently we're sat about 118,000 fans up heading into the last 5 weeks. That's pretty amazing, and we've already got our main event sorted with Roman versus R-Truth of Wrestlemania at a level 4 rivalry, so it's looking fairly good going into the last 5 weeks. In week 11 we're having some serious stamina issues as I can't sign any free agents to give these guys a break. And unfortunately in the pool of jobbers we have, they don't have the class types or the heel-face dynamics that we need. So as you can see, we've signed Vicky McLeod, or McLeod as someone pointed out in the last video, and we're going to role change her to be a face bruiser to face off against Candice LeRae. But now I think about it, actually, it might make more sense to turn Candice LeRae face, as she has a much better promo skill rating. So in the opener we've got the male tag team title on the line, and I'll be amazed if Ricochet doesn't get injured. Then the main event has the women's championship on the line, with the 2 mid-cards being complete filler matches. So hopefully we don't lose a ton of fans in this week. Okay, so as predicted, Ricochet does get injured, but that rivalry goes for level 3 and it gets us a 3.5 star rating, which is not too bad whatsoever. And the first mid-card match is actually a 2.5 star rating, which is really not too bad, as Timothy Thatcher comes out on top over Joel Wheeler. Incredibly, Rich Arakawa gets the win in a 2.5 star rated match over Kevin Owens, and this show hasn't actually been too bad so far. Then to round things off in the main event, we get a 4-star amazing match between Flair and Brooke actually walks out with the title. After week 11, we miraculously gained another 1,000 fans on Shane, so as long as we can just keep him at bay, we should be fine. I don't know, we'll have to see, but at the moment it's looking pretty good still. Right, so week 12 show is looking absolutely shocking. Luckily for me, Roman Reigns vs R-Truth actually went down to a level 3 rivalry, so we can put that match on and get at least one decent rating. Timothy Thatcher slid into the DMs and said that he was ready to run a main event match, so I didn't have the heart to say no. He's actually got 76 popularity at the moment, so that's pretty good, and he put on a decent show with Joel Wheeler last week, so let's hope that a tables match gives us a decent rating. Then as you can see, the 2 mid-card matches are just some pretty bog-standard 1v1s with Vicky McLeod and Candice LeRae fighting off, and Kevin Owens and Rich Arakawa. Not expecting anything more than a 2-star from Candice and Vicky, and then hopefully a 2.5 star, maybe 3-star from Kevin Owens versus Rich Arakawa. Anyway, let's advance and get this show over with. So we kick off the show with a 4.5 star classic between Roman Reigns and R-Truth, and their rivalry's already back up to a level 4. So as long as neither of them get vetoed, we should have an absolute banger guaranteed for WrestleMania. Of course, in the first mid-card match, as expected, we get a 1.5 star rating between Candice and Vicky, and to be honest, I'm just happy to have them here as complete filler. Luckily though, Arakawa and Owens come through with the goods in a 3-star match, and their rivalry actually goes up to level 3, so I'm pretty chuffed with that. And then in the main event, Timothy Thatcher unfortunately falls short on his promise and only gets a 2.5 star rating for his match with Joel Wheeler. Not a good show at all, so let's just advance and quickly forget about this one. So I'm extremely worried that that could be the turning point in our run, as they've actually gained 50,000 fans and we lost 4,700. So all of a sudden that 120,000 fan lead has been crushed into a 65,000 fan lead. These next 3 weeks are going to be extremely tough, so let's just hope that we get through them and end up winning the run. So week 13 show is looking a lot better, as the female tag match is physically capable of being put on. Becky and Io have decent stamina, whilst Jody and Tamina have some pretty good stamina between them, and that match is hopefully going to carry us a little bit in the early show. Then we've got the classic Timothy Thatcher versus Joel Wheeler and Rich Arakawa versus Kevin Owens as our mid-card, with the main event rounding things off with Dana Brooke versus Charlotte Flair for the NXT Women's Championship. I'm hoping that no one gets injured in that match, as that would be an absolute disaster going into WrestleMania. A pretty great start, as we have a 4-star match between Tamina and Garcia and Sharian Lynch, with Tamina and Garcia actually coming out as the champions. The first mid-card match gets a pretty respectable 3 stars, as Timothy Thatcher wins again against Joel Wheeler. That rivalry is also level 3, so I'm actually really happy with that result. I don't know where this has come from, but Kevin Owens vs Arakawa just randomly got a 4-star rating. Then the show ends with a 4-star rated match between Flair and Brooke, where Charlotte wins back her women's championship. We managed to gain around 4,000 fans this week, so hopefully if we can just keep doing that, we can enter WrestleMania with a decent 60 to 70,000 fan advantage. Week 14 actually looks pretty good, with the male tag team titles finally being able to be contested for again, as Ricochet is back from his injury. Then the main event has the female tag team titles on the line yet again, but unfortunately Becky's already back below 40 stamina. The mid-card fights are the classic filler matches, but I've actually booked in Candice LeRae versus Vicky in an Extreme Rules match because I've got so much money to burn, I might as well try and get the rating up. Then finally, you've got Timothy Thatcher versus Joel Wheeler in a tables match, so hopefully that one goes alright and the charity promos gain us some extra fans. Kicking things off very nicely, we have a 4-star match rating for Ricochet and McGurder versus Strong and T-Bar. That rivalry is also level 4, which is perfect going into WrestleMania. Even though we put them in an Extreme Rules match, Candice LeRae versus Vicky McLeod only gets a 2-star rating. But that's absolutely fine, as we just needed matches to fill in as we gain some stamina back on our stars. Joel Wheeler actually picks up his first win over Timothy Thatcher in a 3.5-star match. Then to end the show out, we have Garcia and Tamina retaining their titles again in a 3.5-star match against Lynch and Shirai. Also, that one's level 4 as well, so WrestleMania is actually looking fairly good. We've managed to gain about 12,000 fans on Shane this week, so as long as he doesn't veto any of my stars, put on a double cost card, or do any other shenanigans, we hopefully have this one in the bag. We also have a ridiculous amount of money to spend, so yeah, let's get into the next week and book WrestleMania as best as physically possible. So heading into WrestleMania, the card is looking suitably stacked, with 2 Hell in a Cell matches as the opener and the main event, with both of those having the male and the female championship on the line, and then the mid-cards start off with Timothy Thatcher versus Joel Wheeler in a TLC. The second 2 mid-card matches are obviously going to be the 2 tag team rivalries, with the women's tag team titles on the line in the middle match and the male tag team titles on the line in the third mid-card. Then of course, to try and push us over the line, we've got 4 charity promos booked, so let's advance and see if we manage to successfully beat Shane. The opening fight has Dana Brooke versus Charlotte Flair get a 4.5-star rating, and Dana Brooke actually walks out with the title. And she also gets injured, so that would be a massive pop for the babyface. The first mid-card fight has Timothy Thatcher beat Joel Wheeler in a 4-star rated match. And I just want to say that Timothy Thatcher has actually ended up being one of the stars of this run. Without him, we couldn't have dealt with all of our stamina issues, and he's actually put on some great matches when he's needed to. The second mid-card match sees Becky and Io claim back their tag team titles against Garcia and Tamina. That one's also a 4.5-star classic, so it's been a pretty good start to the show so far. Then the third mid-card match is another 4.5-star rating, and Ricochet and McGurder retain again. These two have been unstoppable since I paired them together, and they've come and delivered the goods on the grandest stage of them all. Then to end the show on an absolute bang, we have the old reliable rivalry of R-Truth versus Roman Reigns. Somehow, in one way or another, these two have managed to keep their rivalry alive for the entire 15 weeks. I've never actually seen that happen, but it's been very beneficial to this run. And also, R-Truth beating Roman Reigns at WrestleMania for the title is a massive, massive event. So that show went really well, let's advance and see if it was enough to beat Shane for good. And as you can see, it definitely was enough to beat Shane in the end. We finished about 55,000 fans ahead of him, and that run ended up being a lot closer than it should have been. I've got to say that the autofill feature on the draft is actually not too bad. I think what hurt me more is not being able to sign free agents and only being able to sign jobbers, as they didn't really have a big enough pool of superstars for me to get the right class types or the right heel-face dynamics. But that being said, the jobbers that I did sign ended up doing an incredible job anyway. So overall, this run ended up being really, really fun. If you have enjoyed watching it and want to see some more MyGM challenges, make sure to let us know in the comments, and as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.